Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. My name is Dr. Hira, and I am your course instructor of therapeutic exercise and techniques. As you know, that we have conducted so far successfully the midterm examination and mock examination, and now obviously we have to resuming our syllabus or the course outline of the therapeutic exercise and techniques. That is why I am starting up the new unit, that is the resisting exercises, and what so far we have gone through. Before myths, we covered patient management. The chapter one was the therapeutic exercise foundations and techniques, the basic foundations, and the second chapter was about the health, wellness, and prevention. And the third chapter was about range of motion. Then we discussed stretching exercises in the campus, and then in the when we started taking online classes, we just started with the chapter number 5, peripheral joint mobilization, until this chapter. It was the syllabus of the midterm examination. So now I'm starting the chapter number 6, that is resisted exercises for impaired muscle performance. What is resistance exercise? What is the purpose? What are the indications, contraindications? And we will see all these important dimensions of resisted exercises in this chapter. How to do resistance exercises, when to do resisted exercises, and what is the benefit. These are the very basic things which we have idea about the basic concept of the resisted exercises, the basic advantages. We have very brief we have gone, we have read through this thing, the kinesiology, already in semester 2 or in semester 1 already, I guess. But still, we have to cover up the whole chapter of the resistor exercises with the impaired muscle performance for impaired muscle performance in the chapter number 6 of therapeutic exercise and techniques. Okay. The learning objectives of today's lecture are the definition of resistor exercise we will go through. Then we will see the muscle, what is muscle performance, the components of muscle performance. Let me write this thing, the muscle performance over here. Right? Okay. Then what is muscle performance? What are the components of muscle performance? What is strength, muscle strength? What is muscle power? What is muscle endurance? And how these components can be enhanced by resisted exercises. What are some principles of the resisted exercises? These are the very basic, things which we will discuss in the today's lecture, and the further headings we will cover in the upcoming lectures. So let's start with the slide number 1. This is about the muscle performance. So what is muscle performance? As the name, the word is showing performance. What is performance? Obviously, performance is ability, capability, capacity to do something. So in case of muscle performance, it will be the capability of a muscle, of contractile tissue to do work, to do any activity. But obviously, if the we are talking about contractile tissue, then in case of muscle performance, we will define it as capacity of a muscle to do work or to do its action. And obviously, the muscle work, the muscle action is always how it is contracting and how it is relaxing. So capacity of a muscle to do work is muscle performance. So muscle performance, it's a students always remember, it is a complex component of functional movement, and it is always influenced by all the body systems. And these systems can be the anatomical allocation of the muscle, the fibers arrangement of the muscle, neurological support, the biochemical support, the biomechanical factors related to the movement, and also the cardiovascular, the metabolic support, the respiratory, and all the systems which are related to the function, the normal function of the body. They are the things which are associated with the muscle performance. So muscle performance is always influenced by all the body systems. Alright. Muscles must be able to produce, sustain, and regulate muscle tension to meet demands to put on it, because we know that. And okay, as you know that muscles are of three types: cardiac, skeletal, and the smooth. But in this chapter, we will only discussing about the skeletal muscles. So when I will be saying that when I'm talking about the muscle, it must be understood that I'm talking about the skeletal muscles. So, what are the three elements of muscle performance, students? They are the strength, power, endurance. Alright. So, there are three muscle performance elements: strength, muscle power, muscle endurance. So, let's define these terms and let's see what is the exact definition of these terms. And before discussing about the definitions, just remember the disturbance of any of these elements of muscle performance. It can lead to obviously the functional limitation. There will be pathology. If there will be any pathology, it will presenting with some impairment that will be resulting in the functional limitation, and eventually it will result into the disability or dysfunction. And if the muscles are not working up to mark, they are not putting up, they are not fulfilling the the demand, if they are not fulfilling the that criteria, then there can be muscle weakness and muscle atrophy. So let's discuss with the components first of the muscle performance. Afterwards, we will go back to the definition of resisted exercises. All right. Okay. The muscle strength. What is muscle strength? Let me check the volume. Okay. Okay. So what is muscle strength? Ability of a muscle tissue to produce tension is known as muscle strength. Okay. So basically broad term that refers to ability of contractile tissue to produce tension and the resultant force based on demands placed on the muscles. Or you can also say specifically, you can also say this is the greatest measurable force that can be exerted by a muscle or muscle groups to overcome resistance during a single maximum effort. So this is the definition of muscle strength. Strength is always the ability of component to do something. So in case of muscle strength, it will be ability of the muscle tissue to produce force, to produce tension, or to overcome external tension and external force with a maximum effort. And what is the functional strength? Functional strength, it relates to it. Basically, functional strength is ability of the neuromuscular system to produce, reduce, and control forces contemplated or imposed during function activities in a smooth, coordinated manner. And obviously, insufficient muscle strength, it can contribute to major function losses of even the most basic areas. So, muscle strength is the ability of a muscle to produce force, and if it is producing a force, then to produce a force enough to resist another external force. And function strength is the ability of the neuromuscular system to produce force, to control force, and to settle the imposed forces during the daily functional activities, during the basic life of the basic activities of daily living. And what is strength training? This is a systematic procedure of a muscle or muscle group lifting, handling heavy loads, resistance for low repetitions or short period of time. And it leads to an increase in the maximum force producing capacity of muscle due to neural adaptation and an increase in muscle fiber size. Basically, they want to say that there is hyper ट्रॉफी तो और अभी तक के लिए बस आप इतना याद रखें for so far you must remember that the resistance training or the resistance the application of resistance force on the muscle, it leads to hypertrophy, right? So there will be hypertrophy with the resistance training and the strength training, due to which the muscle will be exerting the more force. All right. So, the strength training, it leads to increase in the maximum force producing capacity of muscle. Obviously, if the individual muscle fiber size will be increased, then the force production capacity, the per unit area of the muscle fiber, it will be increased, due to which the muscle will be producing or exerting more force. Then comes the second component of muscle performance, that is muscle power. First one was the muscle strength. Second component of muscle performance is muscle power. Muscle power is, students, power is always the basically the combination of work by time. So in case of muscle, it is the muscle work, muscle force produced by the muscle per unit time. So the muscle power, you can also say this as a rate of performing work. Basically, we divide the power into two type of powers: aerobic powers and the anaerobic powers. Anaerobic power, it involves a high intensity activity. For example, a high jump, that is the example of anaerobic power. And the aerobic power, in which you involve a repeated activity with the low intensity. For example, climbing stairs, ascending stairs, descending stairs, etc. So aerobic power and the anaerobic power. So the second component of muscle performance is power. That is basically related to the strength and speed of the movement. And the definition was, we have discussed the rate of performing work. All right, work per unit area of the muscle. This is the muscle power. Okay. So what is power training? Obviously, many activities of daily living, they involve both strength and speed training. So power can be enhanced by either increasing work of muscle during the specified time period of a specific time period of time, or by reducing the amount of time required to produce a given force. Okay. So you, if you want to increase the power, then you can either increase the work, or you can decrease the time period required to produce a given force. Okay, in the W by T, the power was equal to work per unit time. So either you can increase the work, or you can decrease the time, amount of time. All right. The greater the intensity of exercise and the shorter the time period taken to generate force, the greater is the muscle power. All right. The greater the intensity of exercise and the shorter the time period, the greater will be the muscle power. So this is about the power training. Okay. And always remember that this power training, this is one of the important, component in the rehabilitation program, because if the muscle strength is necessary foundation for development of muscle power, similarly the muscle power, it must be incorporated in multiple rehabilitation programs and multiple exercises program, so that there can be the integration of both components, the strength and the training. All right. Okay, let's have a look at the definition of plyometric training, or short shortening drills. This is also known as short shortening drills. This is intense advanced form of exercise in which the muscles are first stretched and then contracted. That means that pre-stretching makes the muscle contract with greater force. And this is basically plyometric training is used for power training regimes, and they are the powerful, they involve powerful and high impact activities. And plyometric training requires both strength and endurance, jumps and hooping activities, uh, uh, crossing the obstacles, etc. This is the basically the example of plyometric training. Okay, but always remember they involve the intense and very advanced form exercises in which the muscles are first stretched and they are being contracted. Okay. So, so far we have read about the two components of muscle performance. One was one. The first was muscle strength, ability of a muscle to do work, and the second was muscle endurance. The second was muscle power, ability of a muscle to do work or to produce force over a time period. So third is muscle endurance. So, muscle endurance, we always remember that endurance is always a phenomena related to uh, fatigue, or related to, the power without without getting fatigued. So, endurance is basically ability to perform low intensity, repetitive, or sustained activities over a prolonged period of time, without getting fatigued. All right, so if you say that a person can do this, that will be his strength or his capability. If you say that the person can do for a longer, for that can, if a person can do more work in a short time period, that will be his power. And if we say that the person is able to do more work without getting fatigued, then that will be endurance. So, ability to perform low intensity, repetitive, or sustained activities over a prolonged time period, they will be the that will be the endurance, muscle endurance. So, in muscle, the basically endurance is divided into the two types. One is musculoskeletal endurance, the muscle endurance, and the second one is cardiopulmonary endurance, which we will discuss in the aerobic exercise. Cardiopulmonary endurance, it basically involves the whole body muscles. So it is defined as repetitive dynamic motor activities such as walking, dancing, cycling, jumping, hooping, ascending stairs, descending stairs, any activity that is involving the muscles of whole body in a single activity, that is basically the cardiopulmonary endurance or the aerobic exercises, which will be telling or which will be defining the total body. While in the contrast, we have local endurance or the muscle endurance, which is again the ability of a muscle to contract repeatedly against a load, against a force, generate a sustained force, and resist fatigue over an extended time period. So, this is a muscle endurance, and always it is required in almost all daily living activities. And endurance and power, they may not present. Okay. So we have discussed three components of muscle performance. Number one is muscle strength, number two is muscle power, and number three is muscle endurance. If the muscle can do some activity, some ability, it has to perform action, that will be muscle strength. If the muscle can do an activity for a longer, if a muscle can do more work in a low time period, that will be muscle power, or we can say it can do more work, or we can also say that it has ability to produce more tension in a low time period, that will be the muscle power. And if we say that muscle can do a work repeatedly without getting fatigued, that will be the muscle endurance. Okay, so this is the basic, the they are the basic components of muscle performance: muscle power, muscle strength, and muscle endurance. They cannot come in the short SEQ and the long SEQ, but for the MCQ point of view, these headings, these points you have to remember. And what about the endurance training? Having a muscle contract and lift or lower a light load for many repetitions or sustain a muscle contraction for an extended period of time, that will involve the endurance training. It involves three elements: low intensity muscle contractions, large number of repetitions, and prolonged time period. Okay. So, low intensity muscle contractions, large number of repetitions, and for long time period, it involves some endurance training. They are the components of endurance training. And adaptation, how the body or the structure will be adapting. Adaptation is by increase in oxidative and metabolic capacities, which allows better delivery and use of oxygen. We will go through the detailed endurance training in the aerobic exercise, that is the chapter number 10, I guess, chapter number 9, and less damaging and more comfortable than the strength training activity, because it is involving simultaneously the very basic systems of the body. Simultaneously involves your cardiopulmonary system, your respiratory system, your musculoskeletal system, your metabolic system. So this is the basic training of all of these three major systems, and the body will work in in a very coordinated and systematic manner when the person or the patient is going through the endurance training. All right, let's discuss now the definition of resistance exercise. So, first of all, as we are following the sequence of the book, so in the sequence we have in the initial pages on the page 1, Chapter 6 we have muscle performance, and afterwards there is the definition of muscle. Afterwards there is definition of all the components of muscle performance. So now we have the definition of resistance exercises. Okay, all right. It's a form of active exercise in which dynamic or static muscle contraction is resisted by an outward force applied manually or mechanically. Okay, so any form of active exercise in which dynamic or static muscle contraction is resisted by an outside or external force applied manually or mechanically. It is used in case of impaired body function, but it can also be used to promote or maintain health and physical well-being. Okay, so they are the active exercises in which dynamic and static muscle contraction is resisted by an outward force applied manually or mechanically. So, what is meaning here by dynamic and static muscle contraction? He is talking about actually isometric contraction type and the isotonic contraction type. If there is a resistance against the doing movement, if the person is moving and you are resisting his movement, that will be example of isotonic contraction or the state or the dynamic contraction. But if the person is not basically moving, or he is just contracting the muscles, or he is just he is just holding a thing or holding a weight, but he is not moving the limb, that will be example of the static muscle contraction. Again, another definition of resistance exercise, they are the active exercises. Obviously, active exercises they are, or then only then we can add up the muscle contraction phenomena here, in which muscle contraction is resisted by the external force, and this external force it can be either manual or mechanical. Either you can resist the movement with the head, or you can use a mechanical device, for example, the pulley with the weights, for example, therabands, and then a number of resistive devices are here. Okay. Alright, so what are the potential benefits of resisted exercises? It will enhance muscle performance, and all the components will be enhanced. Obviously, the components for muscle strength, muscle power, and muscle endurance. Increased strength of connective tissue will be there by if you use the resisted exercise. There will be greater bone mineral density or less bone demineralization. That means that also involves the it also improves the strength of hard connective tissue, that is the bone. It increases the bone strength as well. It decreases stress on the joints during physical activity. It reduces risk of soft tissue injury. It improves capacity to repair and heal. Possible improvement in balance. Enhanced physical performance during living activities, occupational activities, and recreational activities. Positive changes in body composition. Increased lean muscle mass and decreased body fat. It will cause enhanced feeling of physical well-being. It will improve in the perception of disability and quality of life. So they are the a lot of positive benefits of the resisted exercises, after which this is the most important are. It will improve the muscle performance. the muscle, it will improve the muscle strength, it will improve the muscle power, and it will also improve the muscle endurance. But in case of the larger muscle or the a number of more number of muscles, and it will also improve the strength of connective tissues, and it will improve the bone strength. So these are the potential benefits of resisted exercises, or you can also say the advantages of resistance exercises. Okay, so So, so far we have discussed about the muscle performance, three components: muscle strength, muscle power, and muscle endurance. And afterwards, we saw about the definition of resisted exercises. These are the active exercises in which the muscle will contract and it will come in outer resistance for some external force. And afterwards, we discussed the potential benefits or the advantages that a person can gain from the resisted exercises, from the use of resisted exercises, what we can gain, what are the benefits, and if uh, we see the sequence of the chapter, then there are some principles that needs to be followed. They are the principles. Already, so there comes the four principles which are related to the basic resistance training, and they are the principles that we have. You must have read these principles in the biomechanics. They're the very simple, principles. They are the overload principle, set principle, transfer of training, and reversibility principle. We will go through these principles, obviously, because they are included in the in our chapter again. So let's start with the first principle. So the first principle is overload principle. The definition of overload principle is in order to increase strength or endurance, a load that exceeds the metabolic capacity of a muscle must be used to induce adaptive changes in muscle that can lead to increased strength and endurance. Alright? So overload principle, as it is shown from the name, that overload principle, you have to put a load, you have to put a stress more than the capacity of the muscle if you want to gain some changes in the muscle, if you want to increase strength and endurance. So in order to increase strength or endurance, load, basically an overload, it must be put on the, it must be imposed on the muscle if you want to induce some adaptive changes in the muscle. And if the demands remain will if the demands will remain constant, then you have to maintain the demand. And through this overload principle, this is basically the basic foundation on which we can use resisted exercises to improve muscle performance. Correct? So The overload principle, it's a basically guiding principle of exercise prescription that has been in the foundation on which we are using resistance exercises since long. Alright. So, and remember, always remember that if the demand remains constant, then after the muscle has been adapted, then the level of muscle performance, it cannot be increased. It must be maintained. Okay. And what are the applications of overload principle? Overload principle, it focuses on progressive loading of muscle by changing the intensity of value of exercise. This is a very basic rule that we already know, that we have to increase the intensity or the volume of exercises very gradually, very progressively, right? Similarly goes for the loading of muscle, you have to increase the intensity and you have to increase the volume. You have to increase the stress imposed on the muscle very gradually. First, let the muscle be adapt for the low intensity, then let it be adapt for the slightly more intensity, then more, and then more, and then more, and then more. So this is how, for example, if you are giving a person to do the elbow flexion exercises with the 2 pounds dumbbell, then let him to adapt, let the muscles adapt with the 2 pound dumbbell. Then you will go for the 3 pounds, then 4 pounds, 6 pounds, and so on. Alright. So always you have to go for the slightly increasing intensity so that there must be the adaptive changes. And if the muscle has adapted, then the level of muscle performance it can be maintained. Okay. Intensity of resisted exercises. This is basically the weight or the resistance that is imposed on muscle. Let's take a break. Let the noise be over. Okay, students. So we were discussing about the overload principle that if you want to increase strength and endurance, then a overload must be applied, must be imposed on the muscles. And what how to how to incorporate overload principle in the resistance training, then we have to progressively increase the muscle load. And what is intensity? It was basically the force, the amount of weight, the amount of resistance. And what is the volume? This is basically the collective name for the repetition sets and frequencies exercise. And they can be adjusted in strength training program. Amount of resistance can be adjusted in endurance training program. We can improve time, or muscle contraction can be sustained for a longer time, or we can increase the number of repetitions. Okay. So then the second principle is set principle. Set principle stands for specific adaptations to imposed demands. Okay. The set principle, it basically suggests the framework of specificity that is the necessary foundation on which exercise programs should be built. So basically, this principle is applied to all the body systems, and this is basically the extension of Wolff's law. And what is the Wolff law? This is always the same. This is how the definition is how the body system adapt over the time to the stresses placed on them. This helps the therapist to determine the exercise prescription and proper parameter of the determinants of the exercise to meet functional goals. Okay, so set principle is basically the specific adaptation to impose and that how the body is reacting, how the body system they are adapting over the time to the forces placed on them. Okay. So it helps therapists determine the exercise prescription and proper parameters to meet function goals. Okay. Then comes the first of all, the first principle was overload principle. Okay, that overload the muscle. The muscle, if muscle has some capacity, then you can gradually increase the load imposed on the muscle. What is the wolf flow? That's how the body systems will adapt to the changes. And then there comes the specificity of training. This is defined as that adaptive effects of training, such as improvement of strength, power, and endurance. They are highly specific to the training method employed. So, specificity of training should be considered relative to specific function, mode, and velocity of exercise, well as the patient or limb position and the movement pattern during exercise. And you can also talk here about the task specific training. The specificity of training is related to the morphological and metabolic changes in muscle and neural adaptations of the training stimulus associated with the motor learning. Right? So this is about the adaptive effects of training, the specificity of training. And this is also known as the specificity of exercise. Okay? And for example, students, if the desired functional activity requires greater muscular endurance and strength, then the intensity and duration of the exercises should be geared to improve muscle endurance. This is about the specificity of training. Then comes transfer of training or overflow or cross training. This is basically the carryover of training effects from one variation of exercise or task to another. For example, if you are asking if your person or the patient is doing one task to improve the functional capacity, then if you want to switch person from one exercise to the other exercise, then the training effects of the exercise number one, they must be carried over into the second training as well. And they occur on a very limited basis with respect to the velocity of training and the type of mode of exercise. And post training effect, it can occur from an exercise limb to a non exercise limb and from a contralateral limb in the resistance training program as well. Strength training can also improve endurance to some extent, and training at one speed can improve the other speed also to some extent. An exercise program must closely replicate the desired effect. Alright? So, the transfer of training, this is in contrast to the set principle. Okay? Although there is a little evidence that the small degree of transfer of training does occur in resisted exercise program, but some studies they are saying that there must be designing of different exercise program that must closely replicate the desired functional activities, because many variables they are possible in the exercise program, so they can match the requirements and the demands on the placed on the muscle of the person during the a number of functional activities. Okay, so the first principle was so far what we have gone through. In the first was the overload principle. Second was the set principle. The overload principle was saying that you can place more load on the muscle, but gradually you can go for that. Second was the set principle. That is the muscle can be adapted to the imposed demands and it was extension of the whole flow. Then there came the specificity of training that was suggesting the adaptive effects of training. Then there was transfer of training that was saying that the effects of training can be carried over, they must be carried over from one activity to the other activity. And the third principle is reversibility principle. So what is this reversibility principle? Reversibility principle says that performance gains are related to the levels of training. Okay, So the gain in strength and endurance can be temporary unless training induced improvements are regularly used for functional activities or unless individual participates in maintenance program. Because obviously we must remember these things, that some effects of exercise can be temporary if they are not being used permanently. So, this reversibility principle says that the effects or the adaptations gained by the exercises, they can be transient, they can be temporary if you don't incorporate those exercises or the effects which are being caused by some specific exercise for a longer time period, or you don't use those exercises in the functional activities. It's a simple way that you can incorporate some activities as the functional activities, or a very simple exercise that can be done in the even the very friendly home or the room environment. So if you cannot go for the maintenance program, then the performance gain that will be the temporary. Okay, so this is the reversibility principle. And the last definition is of detraining. What is detraining? Detraining, once the training stimulus is removed, the performance gain will revert back to their original state. Okay, so this is a detraining. If you remove the training stimulus, the performance gain they will be reverted back. The changes will be reverted back, and reduction in muscle performance begins within a week, two, or after the cessation of resisted exercise and continues until training effects are lost. So use gains in ADLs. In the next lecture, I will tell you that what are the changes that the resisted exercises imposes on your muscle, what are the adaptive changes that the muscle is taken from the resisted exercises. And always remember that in the when we start the resisted exercise, it almost takes 2 to 3 weeks, and maximum 4 to 8 weeks. In the 4 to 8 weeks maximum, and the changes start coming from 2 to 3 weeks. So it takes minimum 2 to 3 weeks for the effects to be appear, and the effects are always maximum in the fourth week, or till the 8th week of the resisted exercises. So you have to, not only you have to continue to participate in the improvement exercise, or in the continuity of the multiple function activities. So if you want to gain that thing, the adaptive changes permanently, you really need to use those activities, your function activities, your ADLs, your maintenance programs, the exercises, simple exercises that can be done, you know, in any setup, that can be done even in the bedroom, or even in the home friendly setup, just in order to have those adaptive changes or those positive effects which you have gained. So once the training stimulus will be removed, the performance gain will also be reverted back. All right. So you really, so this these principles, they are the baseline foundations of the principles of the resistor exercises. So in the today's lecture, we discussed about the muscle performance, the components: muscle power, muscle strength, muscle endurance, and then we discussed about the definition of resistor exercises, the benefits of resistor exercise, and some basic principles: overload principle, reversibility principle, detraining effects, set principle, specificity of principle, and carryover training. So they are the very basic, simple things from which the MCQs, a number of MCQs can be, they can be drawn. So just have a look from this lecture, and if you want to ask any question, then you can ask me any question. Then you can ask me. Okay.